that's better without the slide. Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you very much to attend this lecture and discussion in this afternoon. As I think all of you, I'm deeply concerned about the recent developments in the Near and Middle East. Today we see the fifth day of the military attacks of Israel and US armed forces. It means we are at the beginning of this conflict. I think it's in the moment, it's not foreseeable whether it will have a duration of several weeks or months and so on. In every case, we will see a lot of intended and most importantly, unintended consequences. What I'd like to do is to explain why these military attacks are illegal, why they do not have any legitimacy, and why at this point we do not see any strategy behind this military attacks. That means it is a war of choice because, in the words of Trump, he has all the cards and Israel have all the cards, but it's not in the framework of international law. Let me add some words on my personal expertise. I'm an expert on international security, on nuclear weapons, on nuclear arms control. I did research and I'm doing research on the so-called Iran issue for maybe 25 years or longer. I've taught during my times at the Helmut Schmidt University, partly together with my colleague August Pradetto, who is present here, a lot of teaching on this issue. And I'm also not a professor of international law, but I have a certain knowledge of international law. I'm not a Middle East expert and Iran expert, but of course the question of nuclear proliferation in Iran is connected with a certain knowledge and certain expertise on the region as well. I think in the moment we are still evaluating the situation, and as all of you know, war, and especially this kind of military conflict, is unpredictable because the United States and Israel are in a position of overwhelming military strength. But as we have witnessed in the case of Iraq more than 20 years ago, Afghanistan, Vietnam, decades ago, military might is not only the decisive thing. It's complicated. We will see, I think, not only symmetrical military warfare, but asymmetrical hybrid warfare. And we may see in the future maybe a civil war within Iran, and maybe additional military consequences in other countries. But let me first deal with the question of legality, and then the question of legitimacy, and then third, the strategy and ways out. We agreed that I will speak around 30 minutes, and then we will have enough time for the discussion. And please let me add one important point, personal important point. when I was a student and a PhD student and a young assistant professor in Bonn and then most of the time in Berlin, we had a lot of students from Iran in Germany. And at that time, it was the time of the Iran-Iraq War. I met a lot of people, students and young researchers from Iran. All of them opposed the Shah regime. All of them participated in the revolution of 1978-79. But in the 1980s, the ways and strategies are quite different. Most of my friends of the time, Iranian friends, at that time opposed the regime and hoped for a third way. No Islamic revolution, no autocracy, no Shah, but something in between. And today, for a couple of years, due to internet restrictions and other things, I have no communications with some of my former friends. But of course, I have them in mind because bombing a country is in one sense theoretical. In the other sense, if you have friends in Iran or Ukraine or other countries in the world, you are you keep your friends in mind and not only the theoretical situation. But now I'd like to say some words on international law and the legality or illegality of those military attacks. Fortunately, international law is very precise, and it has a long tradition, and it does not change within weeks or months, and it does not change when major powers decide to breach international law. There are two reasons for the legal use of force. First, the self-defense of a country, and then what the international law describes as a imminent military threat. And Israel and the United States, both governments, have offered a lot of reasons for the military attacks. The reasons are not always in accordance with each other. Some of the reasons have been mentioned in the beginning, but not now. For example, regime change is not so important for the United States of America. It is, of course, important for Israel. But I think the real reason is not within international law, but the real reason is that Israeli Secret Service was convinced on Saturday morning that at a certain time, Iranian leader Khamenei was at his residence, and this was the appropriate time to decaptivate the Iranian leader. I think this was the essential reason to start the military attacks. And it was neither founded on military attacks by Iran, nothing happened before, or an imminent military threat. And I'd like to quote the director of the International Atomic Energy Organization, which has a very close look on developments in Iran, and he stated very clearly that Iran is far away from developing nuclear weapons. It's not a question of days. It's not a question of weeks. It's not a question of months. It's a much longer question. And I'd like to remind you that 6 or 7 months ago, US President Trump stated that he or American Air Force has destroyed the Iranian nuclear program. So there is a gap between stated goals and the reality. And in this context, I think it's very important that some of our participants mentioned the position of different European states. I think Europe is divided. I think the population in nearly all European states is against this war. From my counting, the majority of governments is in favor of this war for different reasons. But in the special position is my own country, Germany. And yesterday, the German Chancellor visited Washington and had discussions with Donald Trump and other US leaders. And after this meeting, which was a special one, I think it's noteworthy to remind you on Trump's comments and Merz missing comments on Spain and the United Kingdom. Merz issued a lengthy press statement, and in this press statement, he explained then that from his knowledge, there was an imminent military threat because Iran was nearly ready to combine missiles and nuclear warheads, and this might be a question only of weeks. Interestingly, this statement was until now not really noticed in the German public. And interesting, the German Chancellor offered no proof. I think the proof is that he has a conversation with Israeli Prime Minister Mr. Netanyahu, and Mr. Netanyahu tells us for the last 12 or 15 years that in the next weeks Iran will have a nuclear weapon. I think it's very remarkable that the German Chancellor made this statement. I await from our elected representatives that they inform us with their proper knowledge and not with propaganda and more than propaganda. So we have to look close to the further debates, especially in Germany. But from the point of international law, there is no justification at all. So in some cases, it is not only the question of legality. From my point, legality in international affairs is the decisive point. But sometimes there are overwhelming reasons why it might be necessary to breach international norms and law. But in these cases, a violation of international law remains a violation of international law. It does not change the international law. And if we have a closer look on the justifications presented by the United States government and the Israeli government, I do not see any argument that really has the value of a higher legitimacy. And in general, if you have a closer look on international law debates within the United Nations or the international law community, Israel and the United States do not really work hard to present good arguments. They present it in the way that the first argument is we have the military force, and the second argument is therefore we are able to do it, and the third argument is and beside that, there are some arguments, and because we are strong, we are always in accordance with international law. And for the general development of international law, this is a bad development because international law is violated from time to time. It was really violated by the Russian aggression against Ukraine. But if this time and other times, for example, last year, the United States of America as another great power is violating another international law, it's really setting a bad example. By the standards of the United States and Israel, the Russian war of aggression against Ukraine may be justified because the arguments of Russia are weak, but they are not weaker than the arguments of the United States of America. This is not only my personal conviction. This point has been made by a number of international law professors, and I think it is totally right. And they are totally right. And the argument that Iran is a dictatorship and Ukraine not, and that Russia is bad and the United States is good. That might be the case if we debate it from a position of morality, but in the terms of international law, it is without any justification for those cases. So let me have a closer look on further arguments that might be based on legitimacy. Before that, I'd like to underline, and this is also an important point, that when the United States and Israel started their military attacks, Iran and the United States and the mediator of Oman negotiated. And the foreign minister of Oman made a statement that there was a certain progress. And I think it's also a problem that two states negotiate, but maybe only one state, Iran, in good faith. I hope Iran negotiated in good faith. I have certain doubts if the United States of America negotiated in good faith. By the way, we had a similar case before the so-called 12 days war in last June. There have been negotiations between the United States and Iran, and despite those negotiations, the United States of America started their military attacks. The first source of legitimacy might be human rights. The human rights situation in Iran is very bad. This is a bad regime. It is a regime that is suppressing the human rights of the majority of its population, especially of women and of girls. It's a brutal regime. It is a regime that has violated peace and human rights in a lot of cases, not only in Iran, but also in other countries, for example, in Germany, in Berlin, and other places. But human rights violations are no justification for those kind of military attacks. And from my personal conviction, I'd like to add that bombing a country is not a human rights policy. And it does not help human rights policy. And second argument is regime change. This is because the Iranian leadership is weak, and the leader and some other persons have been killed. It's the right time to change the regime. In international law, there is no provision for any regime change. Regime change seemed to be an internal affair. This is complicated, but I'd like to give you a practical example. When the United States attacked Iraq in 2003, there was no preparation. And the United States at that time have been very ill-informed because their hopefuls for the next Iranian governments have been some very bad and suspect criminal figures. But they were telling the United States all the time, we are the right guys, trust us, and so on. And then you know what has happened, the chaos and the situation in Iraq. And a few years later, 10 years later, we have seen the uprising in the so-called Arab Spring, unfortunately not very successful. And in Germany, some policymakers and some influential scientists had the idea to bring the opposition in Syria at a table to discuss the future government and the future constitution in Syria. And this happened between in the years 2012 to 2015. And it was quite successful because all political forces in Syria at that time participated. And then in 2015, the situation changed. There was a Russian intervention, and after that, for a couple of years, until 2024, there was the Russian intervention, and there was no perspective for change in Syria. And now we have a different situation, far away from democracy. And if we have a closer look to Iran today, the opposition is very diverse. The first point is that maybe the opposition in exile is not so decisive. And I'd like to remind you that there are a lot of people from Afghanistan, especially wealthy people in Western countries, especially in Germany, especially in Hamburg, and they do not return to Afghanistan after 2001, but they want to influence the situation. And most of them have been rejected in Afghanistan because they have no roots in the country anymore. So we do not know who is really rooted in the country or not. But what is the decisive point? If you want to prepare a regime change, you should start with steps like coordinating the opposition or bringing the opposition at one table. And this is not a thing that the United States have to do, or Israel or European countries. This is, for example, a challenge for civil society institutions. And if you see the difference between those first steps to prepare a possible regime change and the bombing of the country, I think all of us realize that bombing of a country, no troops on the ground, destroying the country without strategy is no way to foster a regime change. There are no preparations communications and the conversations of the US president demonstrates that very well. And I think he has no idea, and he is looking for some persons, and he thinks in the moment he is almighty, and then he will choose the person, and we will see the further developments. The third point is a security issue: missiles. As we see, the Iran possesses a lot of missiles. The possession of missiles is not forbidden under international law. It is not forbidden for any reasons. It is justified by yes, the right of every country to defend itself. What is of special importance that Iran has no weapon that in any case might reach the United States of America. That means no intercontinental ballistic missile. This is not only my opinion, this is once more the opinion of the head of the International Atomic Energy Organization and other experts, for example, from the Arms Control Association of the United States of America, which is a very well-informed and balanced institution. So there are no reasons from the point of legitimacy. And if you have no strategy at all, I think you do not have any legitimacy, because it's especially if you remember that in the moment, maybe 1,000 people, civilians in Iran have been killed. The statement that we do not have a strategy, but we will think about it, and then it will be good, and we have the power to enforce that strategy, is, from my point of view, yes, simply cynical and nothing more. Before I stop, I'd like to add 3 additional points that are missing in most discussions. First point, JCPOA. In 2015, there was an agreement hedging the Iran possible nuclear proliferation efforts. It was negotiated, and it was very difficult to negotiate it between the 5 permanent members of the Security Council, plus the European Union, plus Germany. It was negotiated with the participation of Russia, despite the fact that the first invasion, Russia's first invasion into Ukraine takes place in 2014. The American participation was very important, and it was also very important that this agreement was secretly prepared by scientists from Iran, from the United States of America, from Germany, in collaboration of the respective foreign ministries. And this agreement was successful. Iran accepted the provisions, and there was no breach from Iran. But in 2018, the United States of America, in the first term of Mr. Trump, left the agreement without any explanation. The agreement was legally binding. It was accepted by the Security Council of the United Nations, and the Europeans were too weak to uphold this agreement. China was ready to do this, Russia as well, but because the European dependency on the United States, the agreement was doomed to fail. But it is not correct that Iran was not prepared to enter an agreement. and it was the United States and not Iran that left the agreement. I think this is of historical importance. And Mr. Trump didn't note that in the last days, and unfortunately, the German Chancellor yesterday also didn't mention that agreement, but makes a statement that Iran never accepted any legally binding constraints to its program. The second point is the US defense strategy and the US security strategy issued in December 2025 and January 26. And in principle, the essence of the strategies is that the United States can do what it likes to do based on its national interest. The word international law is not one time mentioned in these strategies. I think it is remarkable. And a few weeks later, in the case of Venezuela, the American president made a statement that he's not bound by international law. I think he feels himself not bound by national law. The Congress is debating the War Powers Act. We will see what will come out of it. I'm a little bit skeptical, but even if 40 senators are in favor of restricting war powers on Iran, this would be a progress in these days. And if it comes to Mr. Trump is a politician who once in his election campaign stated that when he will shoot down a person on Fifth Avenue, nothing will happen because no one will take him to any accountability. He is above the law. Please remember this. This is a very difficult situation for the international conciliation for the United States and the international law. And my last point is maybe the positive point or the hopeful point. Today, Oman, which has brokered the negotiations between the United States and Iran in the last weeks, made the announcement that the best way is immediate ceasefire and new negotiations between the United States and Iran. And I think the General Assembly of the United Nations should adopt a resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire and for this kind of new negotiations. It may take some time. Maybe the European states, despite Spain and some others, will abstain and not voting in favor of this resolution. But I think there is enough support from the Global South, from democracies of the Global South, from other countries, maybe from Canada and other Western countries. And I think this is the most hopeful step, of the most hopeful proposal during the last 5 days. I'm not very hopeful that the United States will accept this proposal, but in the case that the United States and Israel will go on with the war against the majority of the United Nations, it will be much more difficult for them. So let me stop at this point. And I hope I have raised enough informations and personal observations for our discussions, and everything else I'd like to add in the discussion. Thank you very much.